Good morning everyone and welcome to Coding Studio. This is B and today we are going to be talking about, or should I say we are going to be learning about JavaScript today. And yeah, we are going to start with variables, but before that let's go over the prerequisites of learning JavaScript with me. You might know that JavaScript can run in Node or in a browser. We are going to be starting with the Node because that's easier and you don't have to run it in a browser to see it. We are going to get there soon, but this is going to be very much the basics of it. Okay, so you're going to be needing Node.js. You can download it for Linux, Windows, macOS. It's compatible with every operating system, almost. And the IDE I'm going to be using is Visual Studio Code, but feel free to use anything else. Atom is pretty good if you don't like Microsoft. Atom is made by GitHub, but since it's been bought by Microsoft, well, you choose. But as of today, I think Visual Studio Code is the best choice, especially if you're starting out. And I'm gonna be using GitHub. I will push everything up to a repository. I'm gonna share the link in the description. I'm gonna share all of these links here, and actually I'm gonna be showing you TypeScript, which is JavaScript with types, basically. It's a lot better, in my opinion. You don't have to use it. I will show it to you, and I think I'm gonna be continuing to use TypeScript in the videos too, but I'm gonna show you how to write the same thing in JavaScript. Okay, now let's see. I'm gonna go into my folder. And feel free to learn the Linux commands I'm using here. These are very basics. I'm not a big Linux user. ls is basically just listing the directory, the contents of the directory. And let's see, what else did I use? cd is for navigating. cd ... is going back a folder, and then if you say the content or another folder or something, yeah, it's for folder navigating. So I know that coding is a folder. cd coding just gets you into the coding folder, and here I have another folder. Yep, and yeah, that's it. And if you've installed Visual Studio Code, you can just use this command, which is code. And if you're in a folder and you wanna code with everything that's inside the folder, so that's what you choose as a working directory, you just write dot, so code dot, and it will open that folder in Visual Studio Code. Now, today we are going to be going over variables. This is already up in my GitHub repository, so yeah, you won't know about it until I publish this video, but whatever. So we are going to be talking about variables, and let's do just that. I'm going to create a new file. I'm going to call it more.js, and while we are at it, I'm going to create another file, which is going to be a TypeScript file, so that you know what's the difference is. I'm going to put it next to each other. So the basic way to declare variables in JavaScript, you have to declare it with either let or var. I don't recommend using it. Yeah, I can't have so there's let, var, and there is const. these are variables. As of right now, all of their value is the same, undefined, because we didn't give them a value. So let's just go with something. Let's make it equal to 7. Be some other thing that can be a string value, which is just text. And let's make this equal to an array of things. Okay, so a variable is something that holds a value. So later on, when you want to use that value, let's say I want to write something out to the console, and by something I mean this 7 here. I could have named them better. Let's open the terminal here, and yep, we are already in this folder, and we have var.js in here. Okay, if I were to run var.js, as you can see, it writes out 7 to the console. This is the console here. And since I wanted to log something out to the console, I get this. It's the same if I just wanted this thing written out, save it, and as you can see, it lists it here. So a variable is basically something you store values in. Now in TypeScript, it still works the same. And oh, yep. Yep, like that. This is not necessary. I just didn't use a tsconfig yet to let it know that doesn't import. The problem was that it thought that I've already declared something here because they are in the same folder, and TypeScript wants to be smart in this case. So I'm just importing nothing so that it doesn't mess with me. And if I were to run this, note that it cannot be run with node because it's TypeScript and it needs another node. It's ts node. You have to install the 2. That's pretty simple. It's just npm install. I'm gonna install it globally, ts node, and I should have used sudo, but I think it's sudo because this is not my root thing. Yep, that was the problem. I already have it installed anyway. So you don't have to use sudo if you're not on a Linux machine or you have administrator rights or root access. It's just something Visual Studio doesn't like if you use it from root, so I created another user so that I wouldn't have that problem. You would have to give it a home directory or a user directory or something. Okay, so it's pretty much the same. As you can see, the main difference is that you can give it type. So if I were to say this is a number type, that's perfectly fine, but if I were to give it a string, it would already cry for me that string is not assignable to number. It's a really good safety feature. If you have a function that wants a number, you can tell the function that it has to have a number, and when you call the function later, it will tell you that it needs a number and wouldn't let you put a string value in there. Okay, but back to variables. So this is kind of the only difference as far as variables goes, because later on there are other differences. For example, for a function you can give it you can give the function a type or the return value a type, but we are talking about variables. I'm gonna get to functions later. Okay, so the 3 basic variables are let, var, and const. So these are the words that you declare a variable with. There are not too many differences. A few years ago there was only var for this purpose, and it was fine for everyone. Okay, let's say var insect equals b. If I want to use b later, it does what it's supposed to do. That this is a templating string. I will just put insect here, and if I run this, I'm gonna get, I like bees. The templating string is basically when I declare a string with backticks, I can use this syntax, so the $sign curly braces, and inside there variable name, and it just puts it into the string. It's basically a templating thingy. Okay, so it works the same with lat2. If I run it, same output, and same goes to const as well. I am on autosave. If you wonder why I don't save, you can set it in Visual Studio Code for yourself. It's pretty good, except if you're coding for, anyway, we will get there. So yep, that's the purpose of variables. Now to talk a bit about the differences between them. So var is hoisting. What that means is, well, I will just show you. Console.log, let's say apple, and as you can see, it's not a string because it's not in quotation marks nor backticks or anything, so that it would expect that apple is a variable. If I were to run this code now, it would give me an error that apple is not defined. It's a compile error, I think. It's not a runtime error. Okay, and if I were to say var apple equals, I said equals apple, just to be creative, then it would, what do you think it would log out for me? It's going to be undefined, as you can see. So it's not an error anymore, but why is it undefined when you can clearly see it's apple? Well, it's because I called the variable before it was declared. But hoisting means that when the code runs, this part of the code just goes to the top. This code is basically the same as this. It's gonna still be undefined. Now that is that this part goes up, and it doesn't know the value yet because it's only given it down here. So it's undefined at this point, and it gets defined here. So if I were to console.log apple again, and let's just make it like this again. Okay, so it's gonna be undefined, then it gets a value apple, then it's gonna be apple down here. As you can see, undefined apple. Ooh, I really hope that you can see it actually. Uh-oh. I'm not sure that my great OBS Studio actually records my, oh, of course not. Okay. Okay, I think it's gonna be fine now. I really hope so. I am sorry if it was an inconvenience for you. It's not exactly 1080p, my monitor, so usually cuts down the bottom of the screen. So if I run it again, just to show you, as you can see, it's undefined and then apple. At this point it's undefined, and this point it's apple. Now what would happen if I were to use let? To tell you, let doesn't hoist, so it doesn't goes up to the top at runtime. So it will give me back an error. Apple is not defined. Because indeed, at this point, apple is not defined, only here. So I cannot do the same as var. It would only work like this if I only try to use the variable after I have declared it, and now it's gonna be apple, of course. Same goes for const, that doesn't hoist either. Then why use let? Well, because hoisting is sort of unnecessary at this point. If I wanted to have a variable at the top at runtime, I would just do this, and boom, it's the same as if I were to use var somewhere down here. And here's some code. Okay. And the other difference between var, let, and const is that var is function scope and let and const are block scope. What that means is if I have an if statement, if I have a function, let's call this my function for now, and I have an if statement inside the function, and I let a equals 1 and var b equals 2 and const c equal 3, and if I were to try to console.log A, then B, then C, then what would happen is, I will just show you. Oh, sorry, you have to give something to the if statement. As you can see, nothing happened because I didn't call my function. That's something I usually do, so I am calling my function this time. As you can see, A is not defined, but it's clearly defined here. Now, the reason for that is that block scope means that you can see the curly braces as a block this time. So this whole function is a block between these curly braces, and this is like a sub block inside there. So what that means, block scope, is that this A only lives inside these curlies. Same goes for C. But B is a function scope, so it goes up, finds the functions which it is in, and it's alive in the whole thing. So if I were to just delete A and C, and actually delete these two, and if I run it, as you can see, it knows that it's 2, even though the var is in this block. And here comes the other question, then why not just use var if I can access it from here? Because that's dangerous. You not necessarily want to use a variable from another block, because when you're coding in real life, you use blocks to separate your code, and it's part of the single responsibility principle that everything does one thing, so you shouldn't be able to access something from another block. There are rare cases, but it's usually not the case. So my advice is lose var, only use let and const. Okay, what else can I talk about in this video? Okay, let's see, what can we store in a variable? I'm gonna use let from now on almost every time. Okay, no, I'm gonna use, oh, another thing, var and let can be modified and const cannot. What that means is, if I say let a equal 5, and I would say a equals 7, and I console.log a and save it. If I run it, it will be 7. As you can see, because I gave it the value 5, then I changed the value to 7. Now, oh, sorry, I don't even know why that did work. I will have to check that. So, 7. Now, if I were to change it to var, same thing would happen. It's still 7. If I change it to const though, as you might have guessed, const stands for constant, which kinda means it cannot be changed. If I run it, I will get an error. Assignment to constant variable. So that means that you cannot actually change it. And that's a good thing, because usually you don't want to change the value of something after you have assigned it. There are cases, but whenever you can use const. But I think you can mutate it. So it should be 6 if I'm correct. Nope, it's not. Sorry about that. If it's an array though, so let's say 5, 6, 7, and console.log a, we should get the 5, 6, 7, and if I were to say a equals 4, 5, 6, it would give me an error. Actually, let's go with 5, 6, 7, 8. It will still give me an error, of course, because still assignment constant variable. But if I were to not change it, push 8 to the thing, I think it would let me do that because it's different. Yes. So it pushed 8 into the array. So it's different than changing the value, you're adding to the value here. So yeah, that's a const. Of course this would work on a let or a var too. Okay, now let's talk about what kind of values can you give to a variable. It can be a number or a boolean, which is either true or false, or it can be a string. String is text. I think I've said that, but I'm not sure. Or actually it can be kind of anything. So it can be an equation, or it even can be undefined, or you can assign undefined to it. In some cases you would have to do that, but it doesn't really matter. It can be objects, arrays, functions. So basically anything. And I think that's about variables I wanted to tell you. Everything I've said in a, I would say in a little better organized way is inside this file, which is up at the GitHub repository. So yeah, thank you for watching.